I ran through that hospital corridor as if my legs no longer belonged to me. The floor was slick and cold beneath my shoes, every step echoing too loudly in a space that smelled of antiseptic and fear. My chest burned with every breath, my heart hammering so hard it felt like it might tear its way out. I was 66 years old, and yet in that moment I felt both ancient and helplessly small. The call had come less than an hour earlier. One sentence, no explanation. Robert is in the hospital. There was an accident. Come if you want. Then the line went dead. It was his wife, Clara. Her voice had been sharp, distant, as if she were reporting the weather, not the possible loss of a husband. I hadn't even turned off the stove. I had grabbed my coat, my purse, and run. Room numbers blurred past my eyes as panic blurred my thoughts. All I could think was that I needed to see my son. I needed to touch him, to tell him what I had told him his entire life, that everything would be okay, that his mother was here, because that was my role, fixing, holding, sacrificing. I had built my entire life around that role. After my husband died suddenly of a heart attack, Robert became my reason for waking up every morning. I worked, saved, gave, and gave again. I never complained. Mothers don't complain, do they? They endure. I was only a few steps away from his room when a hand suddenly grabbed my arm. I gasped, but another hand gently covered my mouth. "Please," a woman whispered urgently, "don't scream. Hide. Trust me." She was a nurse, mid-40s, serious eyes, calm but intense. Before I could ask anything, she guided me into the half-open door of the room next to my son's. "Stay here. Don't move. Listen," she said, and then she disappeared down the hall. I stood frozen in the dim room, my heart pounding for a different reason now. Confusion, fear, instinct. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The room was empty, silent except for the faint hum of machines. Less than a minute passed before voices stopped right outside. I recognized Clara's voice immediately. "She'll be here soon," she said casually, "but we still have time." A man answered, calm, professional. "Good, then we proceed. The property transfer must be ready before he wakes." My blood ran cold. They weren't talking about recovery. They were talking about assets, my house, my money, the life savings I had trusted my son with because I loved him. "And the pills?" the man asked. Clara laughed softly. "Already handled, a little more each week. The doctors think it's stress." I covered my mouth to stop myself from screaming. They weren't waiting for my son to die. They were making sure he did. That was the moment I realized my son wasn't in danger from an accident, but from the woman he slept beside. I don't know how long I stood there listening. Time lost its meaning. Every word that came from Clara's mouth felt like a blade slicing through my chest. She spoke of poisoning my son the way someone speaks of following a recipe, calm, precise, proud. The man with her, a lawyer, asked about legal risks, about me. He said, "She has no rights. Everything is in your husband's name. Legally, she is nothing." Nothing. After decades of sacrifice, that was all I was. When they finally left, I slid down the wall onto the cold floor, shaking so badly I couldn't feel my hands. My son was dying, slowly, quietly, and the person responsible was planning what dress to wear to his funeral. The nurse returned minutes later. Her name was Elena. She knelt beside me and took my hands. "I recorded everything," she said, "and you're not crazy. I suspected poisoning weeks ago. My sister died the same way." She explained everything, the altered blood tests, the IV tampering, the cameras. There was proof, real proof, but we needed time. "You have to pretend," she told me. "Act like you know nothing. Keep her calm until the police arrive." Pretending had never been my strength, but surviving had been. I walked into my son's room and saw him lying there, pale and fragile, wires everywhere. Clara stood beside him, tears perfectly placed, grief rehearsed. She hugged me. I hugged her back, and I smiled at the woman who tried to murder my child. I was about to play the most dangerous role of my life, and one mistake could cost my son everything. For 20 minutes, I talked with my son's would-be killer as if she were family. I apologized, I offered money, I played the foolish old mother she thought I was. And it worked. She relaxed. She believed she had won. Then the door opened. Police officers, detectives, the nurse, the doctor. They read her rights while the recording played. Her confession echoed through the room. I watched her face drain of color as the truth crushed her lies. She screamed at me as they put the handcuffs on, called me names, promised revenge. I didn't respond. Mothers don't argue with monsters. They protect their children. But catching her was only the beginning. My son was still fighting for his life. The next 2 days were torture, treatments, antidotes, endless waiting. I talked to my son nonstop, told him stories, begged him to stay. On the 3rd morning, his fingers moved. He woke up, alive. When I told him the truth, he cried like a child, and I held him just like I used to. Love almost killed him, but love saved him too. And justice was still waiting 6 months later in a courtroom. The trial was brutal. Evidence after evidence, victims before my son. She was convicted. 32 years. We rebuilt our lives together, and I learned something powerful. Being a mother doesn't mean being weak. Sometimes it means becoming unstoppable. I survived betrayal, silence, and fear, and I will never be invisible again.